Welcome to the Knowledgebase Ninjas podcast, where Gauri Ramkumar of Document 360 finds the best SaaS self-service knowledge bases in the world and then interviews their creators. Let's get started with today's episode.
Good day, everyone. Our guest today is Marco Cacciacarro. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Marco.
Yeah, you did a great job.
Senior technical writer and tool specialist at Blackberry. So welcome, Marco, to the Knowledgebase Ninjas podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very flattered that you invited me to be on the podcast. I'm very excited to be here.
Fantastic. Pleasure is ours. Thank you so much. So Marco, please help me understand a little bit more about yourself and how did you initially got into documentation and what was your triggering point?
Sure. So I actually went to university as an English literature major here at the University of Waterloo. So I live in Canada, in Ontario, just about an hour away from Toronto. For most people know Toronto, but not so much kind of the area where I live, which is Waterloo. Waterloo is basically the home of Blackberry. And I was lucky enough that during my program, the University of Waterloo offers co-op terms where you get to work for about 4 months at a time at different companies. I was lucky enough to land a tech writing job at Blackberry. Worked there for a couple terms, and then I was lucky enough that they hired me on full time. And it was very fortunate for me because I think as most English lit majors, you kind of start to think pretty deeply about what you want to do with your life, if you want to become an academic or if you want to get into something more practical. And I realized pretty quickly on in my education that I was far more suited to a life of practical 9-to-5 employment than I was the academic life. So I decided to try out a couple different types of jobs in my co-op program, and tech writing was actually a great fit for me because it allowed me to do what I really love, which is writing, and also get to learn a lot about tech and get to work with a lot of different people, have a lot of variety in a job. And basically, I learned very quickly that tech writing is a very expansive industry. It has applications in all sorts of different industries, from tech to education to even aviation. I've talked to tech writers in the aviation industry and government, and I just very quickly fell in love with tech writing, and I've been working at Blackberry ever since I graduated. So it's going on now 13 years that I've been at Blackberry, and I'm very, very fortunate to be there and very happy with the day-to-day of what I do. It's the last couple of years have really been very exciting developments in my career. So happy
Fantastic.
To be a tech writer.
Fantastic. So let's talk a little bit more about your process. So what's your documentation process at Blackberry, and who or which team do you normally get involved in it?
Sure. Tech writers at Blackberry are very well integrated into the overall development process. So we're basically part of research and development, a larger R&D organization. And basically documentation is part of the release process. So unless all the docs are ready to go and ready to release with the software doesn't go out the door, which means people take us seriously. And it means that people put, we work with a lot of different groups in developing and tech approving our documentation, including the testing groups, the development groups, customer support, to make sure that all of our docs are rock solid. And I'm very fortunate to be at Blackberry because when I started there, we had a very large and expansive tech writing team that had very well developed standards, and they've only gotten better and more rock solid in the 13 years since I started there. So even though now the company's changed and it's a much smaller tech writing team, with a much more direct focus on specific enterprise software products, our process is rock solid, and it's something that I very happily teach to new hires. And the basic overview of the process is you do your drafting. You have a peer on your team. One of my peer tech writers, I'm on a team of about 15 tech writers or so. You do a peer review. Once the peer review is done, you kick off a tech review with your developers, your testers, your support contacts to make sure that everything is technically accurate. You pass that content to your editor for a thorough copy edit. We have a dedicated technical editor that looks at every single piece of content that we author. Once the copy edit's done and the tech review is wrapped up, you pass it through another peer proofread, either with your editor or with one of your peers as kind of a final quality check. And then once the final documentation is done, we have another series of QA checks before we actually publish the content to the live website. So we have a lot of checks and balances, and we have a lot of processes that really keep our content at a very high QA bar.
Mm-hmm. Super. So just relating to that question, so in terms of factors, what do you consider as important when creating your software documentation?
What do I consider to be the most important?
Yeah, the most important factors, yeah.
Yeah, so Mainly, it's that we help the customer achieve their goal, right? So we produce only customer-oriented documentation, right? As a byproduct, our documentation is also useful to internal people within BlackBerry, like support, like sales, to educate them on our products and help them sell the products and support the products. But our main goal is to make sure that the customer, number one, understands the product. Number two, can use the product efficiently and effectively. And number three, if they have any issues with the product, they can find their answers instantly, right? And that means that we offer our stuff both in PDF and HTML format. The reason why we offer it in HTML format is that they can search for anything in Google and our content is all indexed and they can find exactly what they're looking for, either from Google or from using the search engine on our own website, docs.blackberry.com. And really the customer is our measure of success, right? If the customer is, if we're receiving feedback that our customers understand our product, can use it, and can achieve their goals with it by using our documentation, we know we've succeeded, right? But if we receive feedback that maybe they don't understand a certain aspect of the product or the documentation is not as clear as it should be, then our goal is to revisit that and kind of rejig it and revise it to make sure that we do achieve that goal or explore new and creative ways to achieve those goals to meet the needs of our customer. So it's all about the customers, basically what I'm saying.
Super. So in your opinion, how important is it to be innovative and try new things when it comes to creating documentation?
I'd say it's probably the number one thing I try to do in my job. It's extremely important. I think oftentimes, I'm lucky enough that I get to go to tech writer conferences and I meet tech writers from all different types of industries. And I see kind of two types of tech writers. I see the tech writers that are kind of content to just kind of sit at their desk and just send emails and just write and just follow the edit process and put something out there and follow the process as written, which is good. There's a place for that, right? It's important too. But I think what's most important to me and what brings a team forward, what helps you to accomplish the goals of your company and accomplish those sales goals and accomplish those the goals that will help your company succeed and kind of always be evolving, is that you be innovative and creative and that you really try new things with your content. Some of those things may fail. Some of those things may not work out the way you want them to work out, but you learn from everything, right? Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff that we've done on docs.blackberry.com recently to really flex that creative muscle and try new things, right? So I'll give you one really recent example is that BlackBerry has released these new suites of our products to kind of bundle them together, make them complement each other, and offer our customers kind of 4 different levels of what you get for very specific goals. Typically Docs would not be involved in that, right? We just document the products. We document it as clearly as possible. We put it out there to the world. But really what we're trying to do to align with that goal of offering those suites is we tried new things on our site. So if you go on docs.blackberry.com right now and click on the first block you see on our landing page, I've created these new pages that really offer these nice diagrams of what you get in the suite, what these products do, how they relate, with then links to all of the documentation for all of those products. And that's not something that somebody told me to do. That's something that I thought up, and it's something that we have the capability to do with our advanced tool set. And that's just something that I did. I got it approved. I got everybody in the company, in prominent roles to review it and approve it. And that's just one example of how you have to try new things in order to further the goals of the company. Don't just kind of sit there and do same old. Try new things because you learn from everything. Some things work out great, some things don't, but you always learn something new that will then feed into something else later on.
Absolutely. Very well said, Marco. I'm very glad to hear that. So have you noticed any kind of reduction in workload since introducing quality documentation?
Yeah, absolutely. I can give you a pretty clear example of that. So a little while ago, this was probably a few years ago, we used to have a couple different teams that kind of had a bit of repetition in what they do, right? You had the training side that was producing training documentation, and then the documentation team, my team, that was producing, customer-oriented documentation for our enterprise software. Our team took a critical look at this in combination with the training team, and we realized that we were really duplicating effort, right? We had multiple tech writers doing the same thing and not always aligned to the same goal. So we kind of brought that together, and the two teams worked together to really start to reuse content. And what that did was it reduced workload. It created more content expertise when you had one writer documenting something as opposed to two people with different backgrounds and different levels of experience in different contexts. So we kind of aligned our goals and started to kind of write towards the same goals, and write towards the same purpose of, I write the core of the content, and then you add some stuff to it for training, and I add some stuff to it for the customer-oriented documentation. But that really did cut down on workload, and it allowed us to do something far more efficiently than the way we were doing it before.
Super, that's great. So are you currently generating any organic search traffic from your knowledge base?
Yeah, so we actually use the Adobe Experience Manager solution. So we have an XML plugin. That's our content management system. We author in DITA, and everything we author, like I said before, we offer in both HTML and PDF versions because we have different customers who prefer different formats. But the HTML is really key to our strategy because not only does it allow us to align with Google, because in most cases when customers are looking for a quick answer for one of our Blackberry enterprise products, they'll usually start at Google, right? Unless they're familiar with our site and our content and want to leverage the search engine of our site, they'll usually put something into Google to find what they're looking for. So we really try to offer everything we document in HTML such that it can be indexed and accessible from Google. We use Google Analytics to collect statistics about what our customers are looking at, what search terms they're using, so that we can align how we write with how customers are looking at and searching for our content. We try to keep our branding consistent and follow consistent brand guidelines to really leverage that search engine knowledge to optimize everything for the search engine and to really learn as much as we can. Because again, that's a key part of how we get that feedback from our customers and how we get that information from our customers about what they care about and what they're looking at.
Super. So what direction do you see the future of technical writing going down?
Sure. I really see it moving in the direction of minimalism. And that sounds a bit ridiculous because a lot of what tech writing is minimalism. Probably what I mean to say more than minimalism is micro content. And this is kind of a term you hear a lot at these tech writer conferences that I go to. And really what micro content is just communicating information as efficiently as possible, because the world that we live in now, with Twitter and social media, people consume information very quickly and they want their answers immediately, right? If they can't get it within 100 characters or they can't get it within one tweet or one post or one image, they get frustrated or tired of it very easily, right? People want information, they want it quickly. And what that translates into for technical writing, basically, I think you have to experiment with new ways of communicating information as efficiently as possible. And I use that example of those kind of graphics we put together to communicate the suites, right? One of the key things we try to do in the graphic is to not overload it with text, right? It's not like an infographic that just kind of hits you with a lot of sentences and information. It does hit you with a lot of information, but more in the sense of very short one words that says, you have the icon of the product and then one word that says what that product does, like email or secure browsing or device safety. And it leverages that whole idea of micro content such that you can look at this image and within a few seconds, by looking at the different parts of it and the very minimal words that are used, you can understand what this product is, what it does, who uses it, and why it might be of value to me. And that's not the whole story, of course. You still need full technical documentation that tells you how to install and use the product and navigate the UI. But I think we need to think more about how to leverage micro content and how to leverage these efficient communication practices to draw people in, to catch their attention, to give them a clear idea of what your product is and what it does, so that you can then draw them in and give them access to the full documentation. So definitely, I think micro content is the way of the future for tech writing. And I think people need to think very critically about how they can start using micro content in their websites, in their docs, in their images, to really lead people in an effective way to their technical content.
Super. Fantastic, Marco. So let's move on to our rapid fire round. So who have you learned the most about documentation from in your career?
Sure. I'd say The person I learned the most about documentation from, and I'll kind of extend it to more than just documentation, but more kind of the practice of technical writing and how to be kind of a leader in the field. It's my current manager. His name's Jamie Lambier. And he really, recently I've been kind of kicked up to the leadership team for the team of technical writers that I'm on. And he's really helped me understand that being a good tech writer and being a good lead for technical writers is all about your social game in terms of how you develop relationships within the company, who you work with. We work with so many different people, from our testers to our developers to our sales team to our marketing team, to our external vendors. Like, we work with Adobe, who provides our tool set, and constantly working to evolve and make that tool set as effective as possible. He's constantly challenging me to kind of improve my social game and to think very critically about how I interact with all these people, to really develop strong relationships such that not only do these people help us accomplish our goals, but we also have something to offer to all these different groups as well, right? So a lot of what I'm learning from him is how to develop that social game, how to negotiate, and how to really develop strong relationships both within and without the company that will not only help me do my job better, but will help my whole team of technical writers do our job better. So that's the person I would say right now I'm learning the most from in terms of how to be a good tech writer and how to be a good leadership, how to be in a good leadership role for tech writers as well.
Fantastic. So can you share a documentation related resource you have consumed recently?
Sure. I would say one thing I got a lot of value out of recently, I mentioned a couple of times that I like to go to these tech writer conferences. So one conference I went to last year was the CIDM conference, where I presented a session, and I actually got to attend the keynote speech by Adam Toporek. And it was all about being your customer's hero. And I really got a lot out of his speech, because it was all about how there's two kind of key takeaways I got from it. One is this idea that customers often come to technical documentation when they're already in a state of frustration or agitation, right? They tried to use the product, it didn't quite work. Now they're seeking out the tech docs on their own, and they might be coming at it from a bit of a frustrated, elevated state. And what that means for us as tech writers is that we have to keep that in mind. We have to make our stuff as easy to find and as easy and effective, as easy to understand as possible, and as effective as possible in terms of getting them to their end goal. So when I started to think about that, I developed kind of a new resource within our team that we started to release about 6 months to 8 months ago, which are called workflows. And basically, we tried to focus in on some really difficult sticking points for our products, and then release these workflows, which are basically kind of like pretty KB articles, is how I've heard them described. But it's essentially taking something that can be complex or difficult and making it simple in 10 steps or less, using screenshots, using very minimal casual text, right? Using language that is more kind of casual person to person rather than just kind of dry formal technical text. And the goal of that is to basically take your customer's hand and guide them through something complex and make it simple. Help them get to that end goal in a way that's very friendly and easy. And the goal of that casual language is to kind of, to put it in Adam's words, is to kind of develop a bit more of a human connection between the writer and the customer, so that you kind of dissipate that frustration. And another big thing I got from Adam's keynote speech as well is that idea that a lot of customers use documentation as a way to evaluate a product and understand if it's the product for them, right? It's not just people who've bought the product and want to know how to use it. Some people come at it to understand the value of the product. So that led me to think about how Blackberry's docs address that value, right? Which then led me to talk to our marketing team and see what kind of resources they have to show, use cases, examples of real world customers that have purchased and used this product, because what better way to show value than that? Which then led to us, I discovered that they have a whole repo of these use cases, which then led to me, pitching this to my team that, hey, let's link up our docs pages to these use cases to actually practically show the real world value of our products rather than just talking about that value. Let's show that value. So now many of our product pages on docs.blackberry.com actually link to these real world use cases to demonstrate that value. I would highly encourage anybody to seek out Adam Toporek's books. And if he ever does any kind of speeches at the Tech Writer conferences, I really encourage you to check them out, because I really learned a lot from it. And it gave me some really key ideas that I acted on.
Super. Thank you so much, Marco. And the final question I have for you today is, what is that one piece of documentation related advice you would give to your 20-year-old self?
Sure. What I would say to my 20-year-old self is basically, don't be afraid to try new things. Very early on in my education and in my career, I was very afraid to try new things because I was afraid of failure. I remember one example early on in my career was, in my first year or two of tech writing, my manager asked me if I wanted to go to a conference, and I decided not to because I wasn't too comfortable with travel, and I was afraid that I wasn't going to bring back the right information, or that I wasn't going to, perform up to expectations in terms of learning something and presenting it to my team. And I've always regretted saying no to going to that conference, because it wasn't until later in my career when I really started to push myself to try new things and always challenge myself with new projects and new products to document and new experiences. That's when I learned the most and grew the most in my career. So I would say to my 20-year-old self and to any young tech writers out there, don't be afraid of failure, embrace it, because from every failure you learn, and your fear of failure is often far worse than what actually ends up happening.
Yeah, that's true. Very good. Super. So any last pieces of tips and tricks you would like to share with our audience today?
I don't know. I think I would just say to anybody out there who's kind of thinking about giving the profession of tech writing a try. For example, if you're a student and you have the opportunity to take a term trying out tech writing, I would really encourage you to do so. It's a funny profession because it's hard to explain and make it sound exciting. I always say it's the kind of the curse of tech writers. When you try to explain what you do to somebody who doesn't know what a tech writer is, it sounds like a dry profession, but it's not. It's very exciting. You get to learn new things every day. There's so much variety in your job in terms of not only getting to write for a living, which is amazing, but you get to work with graphics, you get to work with people, you get to interface with so many different groups within your company, you get to work with external vendors, and you also develop a skill set that will be relevant to so many different industries. It's not just one thing that's relevant to one industry. It's such a great and enjoyable profession, and I would say it's definitely worth trying if you're thinking of it. Take the plunge.
Absolutely. So once again, I appreciate all the time you spent with us today. And I know it might be slightly early for you, but it's an amazing journey what you had. And good luck with all the future projects and writing.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated you having me on. I appreciate you having me on the podcast. And thank you again.
No worries, Marco. Take care.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Knowledgebase Ninjas podcast. Please head to iTunes, rate, and provide honest feedback on the podcast. See you next week.